podcast culture loves to talk about protecting the family unit. It brings it up constantly, usually right before it turns somebody's actual family into 45 minutes of monetized content, 3 ad reads, and a thumbnail with somebody's face frozen mid-cry. Because that's the whole model of the Rogansphere, that sprawling ecosystem of long-form, no-filter podcasts that grew up in Joe Rogan's orbit. It runs on intimacy, real names, real relationships, real overshares, 3 times a week. And for a long time, that was the whole appeal. Until the marriages sitting at the center of 2 of its biggest shows stopped being a bit and started being the headline. And this is about 2 couples, Tom Segura and Christina P, who built an entire studio around being married.
She had the balls to accuse me of being a psycho for watching, crime shows.
Sure.
Do you realize that I'm in bed and I hear, and then I'm like, what the? And it's her just watching TikToks, watching I got 4 penny, and then you can catch it like that.
I have to tell you, this is more interesting than any television show out there right now.
Akaash Singh and his wife Jasleen, whose marriage got pulled into a podcast feud neither of them started. A feud that, as of this year, has already cost Akaash the show he spent nearly a decade building.
This couple is so fucking good looking, and you haven't seen Nav yet, but wait till you fucking see him. His body goes crazy. His face card always slays, never declines. And it's kind of weird because I'm talking about your husband.
But it's also about a couple standing just off to the side of both stories, worth keeping in mind the whole way through, who've been running that exact same marriage as content format for almost 20 years without it ever becoming a headline. Same ecosystem, same format, completely different outcome. That gap is worth understanding before you decide this is just how the story always ends. So this isn't really a story about wives. It's a story about a format and who does and doesn't survive it. Start at the beginning because the format itself has an origin story, and it starts with Joe Rogan. Back in the 2000s, when podcasting barely existed as a word, Rogan watched a young comedian named Christina P do a set and told her, more or less on the spot, that she and her boyfriend should do a podcast together. The boyfriend was Tom Segura.
Well, you have to come when we have our new studio.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
And
I
get asked about a lot in interviews and everything. I always give credit to you because I remember you being like, why aren't you doing one? And I was like, I don't know. And then you saw her and you go, your wife is legitimately funny. Don't you think you guys could just sit there and do one? And I'm like, I don't know. And I told her and she was like, I don't know.
Yeah,
and then now that's all we do.
The 3 of them didn't even have a studio. The first 40-odd episodes were recorded on a leather couch in a Burbank living room on the Death Squad network. With a wall unit air conditioner they had to shut off just to keep the audio clean. That show was Your Mom's House. It launched in October 2010, and the entire premise from day one was 2 people who were dating and then married, talking about their relationship on mic.
Good man, good moral character. He was consistent. I could tell that he was a good human, right?
Yeah.
But then we started dating, and I went to his apartment, and he would just sleep on a mattress on the floor.
Oh.
Yeah.
At which point did you decide to get a bed frame?
She was like, you probably should get a bed frame.
Right.
I was like, all right. I mean, I was 25.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't know, whatever.
Is that a flag?
I remember meeting her because it's ingrained into my head. I met her on Sunset.
That sounds traumatizing.
Well, yeah, I thought she was a dude.
He's got a very different account of how it's like.
It was the only idea anybody had, and it worked so well that it became the founding template for an entire genre, podcast as marriage, marriage as podcast, indistinguishable by design. That template is really what this video is about. Not 2 isolated dramas, but a format Joe Rogan personally suggested into existence that went on to shape how an entire ecosystem of comedians think about what a marriage is for. Segura and Christina P took that template and ran with it for 16 years. They married in 2008 and built Your Mom's House into the foundation of something much bigger. YMH Studios, a whole network that grew out of their original on-mic chemistry, eventually home to shows like Two Bears, One Cave and half a dozen other comics. Over 16 years, the show built its own internal language for that marriage. Running bits, inside jokes, a whole cast of recurring internet weirdos the hosts nicknamed and adopted as honorary regulars, the kind of shared vocabulary that usually takes a family decades to build. Except here, the audience was fluent in it too. That's the real product YMH was selling. Intimacy. A marriage you got to sit inside of twice a week for the price of an ad read. These days, the studio is also home to Tom's Netflix series, Bad Thoughts, up for 2 Emmys this year, and Christina's own cosmetics line and solo podcast. The company outgrew the marriage in scope. It never stopped depending on it emotionally. July 13th, 2026, TMZ reported that Tom and Christina had quietly separated after 18 years of marriage. Sources described it as amicable, happening within the last couple of months. A source close to them called the relationship special and productive, and said they're taking different paths while staying devoted to their children. No public statement, no reason given. But the timeline, once you look at it, was already sitting there in plain sight. According to reporting since the split broke, the last episode of Your Mom's House, where both of them appeared together, was episode 856, published back in late April, nearly 3 months before the news went public. After that, they started recording solo. And on the July 13th episode of Two Bears, One Cave, released the same day TMZ broke the story, some fans noticed Tom wasn't wearing his wedding ring, after consistently wearing it in episodes before that. None of that proves anything on its own. It's just what happens when your entire audience has spent 16 years being trained to read your body like a script. A missing ring is the first time the habit of overreading the show happened to land on something real. And still, the plan, according to that same reporting, is to keep co-hosting Your Mom's House regardless. After announcing a breakup, how does one unlaunch a media company built on the premise that you're a couple? Before we get to the messier story, it's worth zooming out for a second because none of this is actually new. Reality television figured out marriage as content 2 decades before podcasts existed. The Osbournes put a rock star's entire household on MTV in 2002 and basically invented the modern celebrity docuseries by accident. A year later, newlyweds Nick and Jessica turned an actual marriage into appointment television. And when that marriage officially ended in 2006, the divorce played out across the exact same tabloid ecosystem the show had spent 2 years feeding. Kim Kardashian's 72-day marriage to Chris Humphries in 2011 wasn't even pretending not to be a television product. The cameras had been there since the wedding invitations went out, so the Rogansphere didn't invent this format. It just changed 2 things about it. There's no network anymore, no editors, no legal team building in a 6-month broadcast delay. A marriage can go from the whole bit to the headline in the time it takes to record an episode. And it's not one camera crew controlling the footage. It's the couple, plus every commentary channel, every clip account, and every stranger with a grudge and a ring light, all editing the same marriage in real time, with nobody actually in charge of the final cut. Now the messier version of the same problem. Akaash Singh's wife, Jasleen, co-hosts her own show, Main Character, with her friend Nehal Tanani, where she talks openly about her life.
A lot, and I'm a very committed dog mom, and
Except when Akaash comes home from a very rough weekend, did like 3-4 shows, and she goes, "Can you walk happy?" I'm tired.
Honestly, yes, retweet, but also Akaash hasn't been doing for happy this week because he's been sick. I did the interview, then went to the emergency room. That's how tough girls
Guys
are.
feel like sissies truly when they're sick. Like it's a little cold. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, can you please get me a blanket and soup? And of course I do that. I love my mans. But
I do it, but I'm like, here,
man up.
man up.
That candor mostly stayed inside her own audience until November 2025, when a YouTube commentary channel built an entire video around clips pulled from her show, taking her personal stories out of context and putting them in front of a much bigger, much less friendly crowd. Fresh and Fit and Flagrant aren't the same show, but they share a chunk of the same audience. Young men who listen to both, sometimes in the same afternoon, for very different kinds of advice about women. Which means when one show calls the other out, It's a fight inside the same room. Myron Gaines from the Fresh and Fit podcast saw it, and Gaines had an old score to settle. Back in January 2022, Akaash and his flagrant co-host Andrew Schultz had gone after Gaines and his co-host on their own show, calling their content corny and childish, and accusing them of setting a bad example.
I looked into what you guys are about, and a lot of the just childish, which is fine if you want to be funny. We just talk about how doctors ain't for 45 minutes.
That grudge sat there for 3 years. Jasleen's clips gave Gaines an opening, and he took it, first with a 2-word comment under the video, then a wave of posts that escalated fast, with explicit insults about Jasleen that multiple outlets flatly called misogynistic. Worth noting, before any of this, Jasleen wasn't some random target. She has a finance degree, a master's in business journalism, and time at Goldman Sachs and Deloitte on her resume. None of that mattered once the clip economy decided what role she was going to play. The strategy, stripped down. You can't easily get to Akaash directly, so you go through his marriage instead. Here's where it breaks from the usual script. On November 11th, 2025, Jasleen posted her own response, not an apology, just her on camera, saying that Red Pill podcast guys were dissecting her marriage and that people online were buying into it. She didn't walk any of it back. She defended making jokes with her own husband and pointed out that nobody had a problem with it when Akaash joked about her from a stand-up stage. 3 weeks later, on December 3rd, the two of them sat down together on Flagrant to address it directly, on the record, in front of an audience instead of through dueling social posts. It was, in its own way, an attempt to take the story back from the clip economy that had been telling it for them.
She had a body count, I would have been like, hey, cut the. But because she doesn't, and I know how like innocent she actually is.
Oh, you are a virgin? That's real?
I was
You
a
were a
virgin
virgin?
until I met him, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, good to know.
Yeah.
And if she wasn't, that body count thing, I'd have been like, what are we doing here?
Right.
Because I would have been insecure about it. But I can be, not that I'm so secure, but with that joke, I'm like so secure.
Oh, I
because
absolutely would feel insecure.
And I think
Yeah.
stupidly, I was like, oh, it's so it's all of us. It's not like
Yeah,
talking.
that is stupid.
It didn't fully work. The internet kept dissecting it anyway. New clips, new timelines, new arguments about who said what and when. For about a month, a private person married to a comedian was the main character in someone else's culture war, whether she'd signed up for it or not. And here's the part that makes this a genuinely different case study from Segura and Christina. This one has a body count, metaphorically speaking, of course. On May 6, 2026, Andrew Schultz used a flagrant episode to announce that Akaash was stepping away from the podcast, the show the two of them had built together for nearly a decade. Schultz called the exit bittersweet. He said Akaash really went through it earlier this year and framed the departure as Akaash choosing to work on stand-up full-time, pointing to a sold-out Radio City show and a touring calendar that had exploded over the previous few months.
As I'm sure you guys are aware, our boy Akaash, he really went through it earlier this year. The experience has put things in perspective for him. And he's made the decision to focus all of his energy on stand-up. He is going to be stepping away from the pod. It is bittersweet. You know, we wish that he did not want to do that.
That's the reason on the record. It's also true that Akaash had barely appeared on the show for months before the announcement. Roughly the same stretch of time his marriage had been the subject of a feud, whether he liked it or not. Whatever the exact cause, the outcome is the fact that matters here. A comedian left a 9-year-old show he co-created months after his wife became a punchline in somebody else's feud. This feels like traceable backfire, whether or not he signed up for it. Now, before this starts sounding like every marriage's content arrangement in this ecosystem is doomed, it isn't. And the counterexample is sitting right inside the same network. Bert Kreischer co-hosts Two Bears, One Cave with Tom Segura, under that same YMH Studios roof. His wife, Leanne Kreischer, has spent years running her own show called Wife of the Party. Over 400 episodes, at this point, still going, still just her, and a rotating cast of friends and guests talking about marriage, parenting, and being married to a man whose entire public persona is built on shark attacks and shotgunning beers. She's also the COO of their production company, a producer on his stand-up specials, and co-owner of the comedy festival they run together. In other words, she's not a character inside Bert's business. She is the business, at least half of it on paper, as well as on mic. That's a meaningfully different structure. Jasleen has her own show too, but main character was built as her own separate lane, and it still got treated as raw material the moment an outside party needed a weapon. Leanne's show is that same kind of separate lane, and so far nobody's aimed a feud through it. Maybe that's the format working the way it's supposed to. Maybe it's just that nobody with a grudge in an audience has gone looking yet. The honest answer is, we don't know which, and neither do they. That's not a knock on the Kreischers. By every available account, this is just a normal, functioning marriage that happens to also be great content. Bert's whole public persona runs on chaos and spectacle, bar fights, wild travel stories, shotgunning beers on stage in front of thousands of people. Leanne's show is the control group sitting right next to it, steady, unglamorous, still running after all these years, doing the comparatively boring work of just talking about a marriage without needing it to be a crisis. It's a reminder that the risk this video keeps describing is a structural exposure. Some couples carry it for 20 years without ever finding out what it costs. Others find out on a Tuesday, from a stranger with an old grudge and a ring light. Put those three cases side by side, and one variable actually seems to matter more than the others. Who's holding the pen when the story turns? Segura and Christina co-own the studio, so even a breakup gets processed through channels they still control. The Kreischers' show is entirely Leanne's, run on her terms, with no outside party who has a reason to weaponize it. Yet. Jasleen owned her show too, and it didn't matter, because the attack came from a completely different platform, with its own audience and its own agenda, one she had zero editorial control over. The risk was never really about whether you talk about your marriage on a podcast. It's about how many other people, on how many other shows, get a vote in how that story ends. Line all of this up, and the pattern gets clearer, not simpler. Segura and Christina turned their marriage into a brand on purpose, for 16 years, and when it ended, the brand had nowhere to put the news except back into the same machine it always used. Akaash and Jasleen didn't build their relationship into a product the same way. The attack came from outside, from a rival podcast looking for leverage in an old fight, and it ended up costing Akaash his job. The Kreischers are running the exact same format, and so far it's just fine. 3 different outcomes, one format, wife is content, wife is scandal, wife is apparently stable normal thing. What connects them isn't that marriage content always fails. It's that once a marriage becomes a recurring character in a show, nobody involved, not the couple nor the network, actually controls what kind of episode it turns into next. It's also worth asking why this particular kind of content keeps winning, because it's not an accident and it's not really about comedy at all. Platforms don't reward funny. They reward watch time and reaction, and almost nothing produces both like a real relationship going sideways in real time. A joke gets a laugh, and the viewer moves on. A marriage in trouble gets a comment section, people arguing about who's right, sharing their own divorce, tagging their friends to come look. Nobody puts that in a mission statement. Everybody who's ever chased a trending topic already knows its inherent value, which means the incentive was never keep your marriage healthy. The incentive was always keep the marriage legible as a storyline, and those two goals only look identical until the day they don't. There's a term for part of what's happening on the audience side, and it's older than any of these shows. Media researchers call it a parasocial relationship, the one-sided bond an audience forms with someone who has no idea they exist as an individual. 2 researchers coined the term back in 1956, decades before podcasts, to describe how people related to radio and television hosts. The clip economy industrialized that feeling and pointed it at people's actual spouses. People who have listened to Tom and Christina bicker on mic for 16 years, feel like they're owed an explanation neither of them has given. People who watched Jasleen get dragged through a feud she didn't start now treat her as a symbol, proof of whatever argument they already wanted to win about dating, about marriage, about who's allowed to talk about their own life in public. None of that is really about Christina Pazitsky or Jasleen Singh as people. It's about an audience that was trained, episode after episode, to watch other people's marriages as a storyline, and now can't quite turn that habit off just because the story got real or expensive or landed on somebody who never agreed to play a character in the first place. So call it what it actually is. The Rogansphere has a wife problem because it normalized marriage as recurring content, and everyone who's taken that deal is now finding out, one at a time, what it costs when the bit stops being a bit. Some, like the Kreischers, haven't been sent the bill yet. Some, like Segura and Christina, get to pay it quietly, on their own terms, still standing. And some, like Akaash and Jasleen, get handed the bill by a total stranger. On a Tuesday, in the form of somebody else's 3-year-old grudge. This didn't start with a podcast, and it won't end with one either. But podcasts are the first version of this format that runs live, uncut, and forever. Which means the couples doing it now don't get the one luxury reality TV couples always had, a producer who could still just say cut. If you want more broken down case studies on the Rogansphere and comedy podcast culture, subscribe, like the video, and tell me in the comments which show you want me to put under the microscope next. See ya.